culture written among different people. And when in anthropology we use term emic, I will not say the etymology of the term emic, but I'll interpret it across to you for your understanding. When we say emic, it is an inside view. So, and when we say attic, taken from the word phonetic, phonemic, phonetic. So, days as superintending anthropologist, I had done extensive field work among different cultures over and so coming to my finding, you know, as human being, how we are facing the pandemic situation, and we got pandemized from coronavirus to variant Omicron whatsoever. We breathe the same air. We understand temperature, climate is not same everywhere, but how coronavirus mutated to different region, to different human being. So coming back to that, my observation is that you should not feel offended. There are some visual coverage, and those visual coverage are really for the dissemination of knowledge. I understand cultural ethos and ethics. Now, what I have taken to understand the kind of acculturation which has taken place in different pockets, be it in Andaman and different Nicobar Islands. So, we know the situation of the AN archipelago, but I would like to emphasize here that once the Andaman and Nicobar Islands were feared for the reason of, I love the word, unfriendliness instead of hostile cannibalism and other. So this unfriendliness was feared, and which is why, compounded with the unsuitable climate, how those pioneers and colonizers faced tremendous difficulties in the island. That was the kind of unfriendliness, the feeling of fear, the xenophobia. That there are naked people who any intruders. But then of late, we are in Nicobar Island as the much sought after destination, the turbulence watch of Indian Ocean. So the island, as we understand, are the homeland of those six tribal populations. In my presentation, I would exclude the Nicobaris because they are no longer termed as the most particularly vulnerable primitive groups. I would like to rephrase the term primitive and use tribal people, tribal groups. So those islands were the homelands of six different tribal populations where they are in different pockets. I'll take you. And of course, these islands are like a social melting pot of heterogeneous community who had arrived later on in subsequent years. And the islands where people think of the flora and fauna of this island. So much is the diversity of recent population over here. So I told you heterogeneous is one, but then homogeneous is one. You see, when we talk of homogeneous, it doesn't mean a narrow example or case in point, the so-called Ranchi people is but a conglomeration of different people like Munda, Kumhar, and what else, blah blah. And they are not homogeneous in terms of clan's name. So homogeneity doesn't mean same community, same people. So in conclusion, the islands are now a homeland of tribal people, heterogeneous, a social melting pot, and then of course, what I term, you can ask me later on. There is no anthropologist alive in my Bandar college, unfortunately. So just a glimpse of the tribal population, increase in the population of the popularly known as Java. I will let you know how I had obtained the term and the Java, which is popularly or notoriously known to different people. So how the population has increased considerably because of the truck regime being maintained by the health department here. So from 400 and odd to 520. As on date, I have not been able to gather, I have not been able to talk to Dr. Pranav Sagar and other AGMs officials in regard to the increase in recent population, if at all. So the entire area, when there was amendment of the Jarawa Act in 2004, I was one of the members and represented in the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, had attended various meetings with the then Chief Secretary, Sabrina, Vivekri, and others. So there were classes when we advocate, when we articulate about things for the amendment. But anyway, uh, the area which required for foraging activities has considerably been increased from 878 square kilometer to 1028 kilometer. In regard to the great Andamanis who had taken to begging on the street in PORTBLAIR, but in one word, I can say that the extinction is occurring right now. Among the Ongi, we have a population of sometimes it is 1010, 12 this much. And there was a huge incident some years back in the early 90s, which reduced some population, about 6 people. And on North Sentinel Island, the figure which we have estimated, we counted, we made a documentary film in 1990 produced by Aruna Prasad, and recently French freelance and filmmaker Camille Bumilek is making a documentary film on the tribes of this island. So the estimated figure is even coming down. In regard to the song, this figure was provided by Satnam. I'm a bit critical about classification of what we call great Andamanis, some of which are completely extinct now. Some pioneer like Yeatman, Goulbrook, Botenclaws, and many others identified only with a subgroup of Sentinelese and Chingil. For some time, the Jarawa were known as Chingil, Minkobi, and Mangabe. They collected various terminology and they have mistaken a great Andamanis as the real Jarawa. So this is one, I will not go into detail, but there was one only surviving language among the great Andamanis. And even that is completely extinct now. They are, the lingua franca among them is speech in Hindi. Now, the Akabir is the one who coined the word Jarva, which in the common parlance mean the other stranger or people who indulge in killing any outsider. So, but none of those subgroups of the present day Great Andamanis are alive. So, the most $1 million question that many had asked about us in the Anthropological Survey of India, and the other day Dr. Ramakrishna described about the movement of tectonic plates and continental drifts. So the origin as such, the lineage which originated from Africa, lineage 1 and lineage 2 migrated. And there are mapping. A colleague of mine, Dr. Anik Ram Sankayan, did some excavation in Narmada Valley and analyzed the clavicle bone, left clavicle bone. Anyway, the origin is like this. And the in fact, in early 1920s, E.H. Mann collected hair strand among the great Andamanis in those days and took them to the Royal Anthropological Museum in UK. Subsequently, rather very late in the 1990s, Professor Heckelberg did analysis of the DNA of those hair strands. And the finding was that the Andamanese tribe, the entire Andamanese tribes, are more akin to a subgroup of Usman Hottentot, known as Khoisan, Khossain, Khoisan. So that is the finding about that. And in regard to the genetic distance, in terms of the Nicobarese population who are inhabiting different 12 islands in the Nicobar archipelago, this DNA study was done by Dr. Ravi Prasad and his colleague in different islands over here. And you see the the genetic distance among different people and how the Nicobar Islands were people. So, as student of man, I'm against employing the term race. It's but a biological concept or myth. So, when we want to distinguish or classify human being, it is useful, but it is not good to classify human being as such. And in fact, race has no relation of any kind with intellectual inferiority and superiority. So this is what, and then I will not go into details, but mutation, heredity, and environment. So, and inbreeding, why ethnogenesis, why new communities. So, what I would like to share with students from streaming from different disciplines. You see, many a time in many seminars, who are tribal people, but you can forget what and who are indigenous people. For the time being, let us think about. We understand what a people is, people within people. So how we have come from, how we can change ourselves, but etymology of the term indigenous. And it is its root is Latin and terms like gender, genital, generation, and genesis. So all connected with birth, reproduction, and descent. So, but this one international piece of legislation exclusively about indigenous and tribal people, which was framed. Peoples in independent countries who are regarded as indigenous peoples on account of their descent from the population which inhabited the country or a geographical region or a region to which the country belongs at the time of conquest or colonization or the establishment of the present state boundaries, and who, irrespective of the legal status, retain some or all of their own social, cultural, and political institutions. So this is some kind of thing which I would like you to understand who are indigenous people, and don't confuse them please with tribal people. So anyone interested to learn more about this may come and ask me anytime. Because of paucity of time, I have to come to the main core of my presentation. So about etymology, I will not go into, but I'd like to say brief about the definition of tribal people, which we are usually self-identities, and we all one people or the other. We may try to change our identity, but we cannot. So, with a very few exceptions, all tribal people are indigenous. Of minority of the total population, maybe 3 lakh and not what is the present figure, total population. Tribal people amount to 8.27% of the total population of the archipelago. So empirical finding reveal they face a different range of issues, while the number of indigenous people in these islands are increasing considerably, than that of tribal individuals who are shrinking. Alas, some of tribal people today are facing disappearance and extinction. So, as per 2004, and tribal literacy rate, both male and female, are on the screen. I'm happy to take a note that literacy rate is now the next grade and the money and the only. So those terms are very derogatory, and we should try to use particularly vulnerable primitive groups over here. And we prefer people, community, prefixing tribal, and specified in next slide, please. So put the next slide. Next second. So